HOI4 has two main modes. You see that? There's two modes of play. See this one? Historical AI focuses, aka historical mode. And it also has non-historical mode. The AI will, when applicable, pick national focuses on a historical order. Select this if you want other countries to follow their historical paths more closely. It's become a bit of a rolling joke on my YouTube. I always say historical game, by the way. It's become kind of a catchphrase. However, I honestly acknowledge that historical isn't historical. It's basically as historical as the game will allow you to be with the player's intervention. Because remember, you as the player are divergent that historical scenario. Because if you let the game play itself on historical, for the most part, you see a lot of history happen in real time. Of course, you will argue that Germany probably will cap a little bit earlier than they normally will do. And maybe there'll be some wacky stuff like Brazil, I don't know, invading Sardinia or something weird, or I don't know, free fans taking back Crete or something, or maybe never breaking Greece, for instance. A lot of these little nitty-gritty scenarios. But here's where I chop the big truth bomb on you, okay? Historical isn't historical. I was like, hang on, Dave, that's what you just said, isn't it? No. For instance, as Germany, if you go down the Kaiser path, aka declaring against the Reich, you will cause France to go communist, creating this kind of new iron curtain of France and the Soviet Union to wedge between, I don't know, the Eastern and Central European nations to form like a little coalition in the center. There are a bunch of other ones as well, but they're the ones that really stick in my mind. I believe, so if the UK goes ahistorical too, there's sometimes France will go in an opposite direction as well. Like, for instance, if the UK goes communist, for instance, I believe France will go fascist as well. There's like these predetermined scripted things that happen in game. So it's kind of like historical is historical as long as these set parameters are made. Basically everyone else goes historical, put it that way. But remember, you as the player have control over the historical scenario, so it's as historical as you want it to be. So maybe we should rename this to historical as much as you want it to be. AI focuses turned on, maybe. We're not here to talk about historical though. We're actually here to talk about historical turned off. And I think right now historical could probably do some love. Needs tweaking, needs some love, needs some attention, all the above. So the question is going to be now, let's go observe. Let's also delete all units to make the game go fast. Delete all units, delete the weather, and also debug smooth. We're going to make the game run really, really fast. I'm going to go 5 speed. So what happens when you turn historical off is all nations will pick a random focus. So instead of a pre-structured path of, let's say, the UK going for steady as she goes, then home defense, then reinforce the empire, they will pick focuses completely at random. So it'll basically be between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It'll roll a 5-sided die, and then the one that comes up will be that random focus that it selects. It sometimes leads to some scenarios where the AI will almost like cook itself in a way, like it will put themselves in a situation that'll be most advantageous to you. Because as a player, we go to ourselves like, well, which focus is the one that's the beneficial to us at this said moment? But the AI won't do that. The AI will select basically any focus whatsoever because it's completely random. As you can see here, because I've turned historical off, the Germans, which is the left one, by the way, I've gone for oppose Mr. H, and you can see this scenario is happening. And then at the same time, France, more than likely now, if I select France, you can probably see that they're going down a different path as well. Be aware that the scripted paths are only as part of historical, so it doesn't mean they're going to go communist because they've gone, because Germans have gone for the Kaiser path. One of the issues I find with historical off as well is because focus is selected at random, you tend to find that world tension will spike really quickly because everyone's doing their own chaotic random path, and it results in quite a lot of civil wars, quite a lot of, well, declarations of wars of nations nearby, and a lot of other kind of wacky randomness as well. Like, for instance, there's certain things that AI will do sometimes that don't even make a lot of sense too. Like, for instance, they'll go for like they'll go for the historical path for Britain, steady as she goes, and maybe home defense. No, actually, no, this is a funnier one. Steady as she goes, and go for Churchill, the Churchill path, the alt historical path, the light historical path. But then they'll also go for revisit colonial policy, which, in all fairness, if you think about that, doesn't actually make any sense, because Churchill was adamantly for keeping the empire intact and keeping it together. He was definitely not for giving the colonies autonomy and let them declare independence and breaking it apart piece by piece. So that, in all fairness, does it even kind of work? I suppose for a player scenario, it is kind of wacky and a bit strange. But overall, it doesn't even make sense. It's actually shooting yourself in the face, you know? Let's see if there's any other wacky scenarios that we can see from this. Oh, look, so the Soviets have gone for the right opposition. So there's a very high chance they'll have a civil war. Then France, for instance, are going down the factory path. Interesting. Haven't selected an ideology yet. Britain's invested into their factories too, in air defense. The choices don't make a lot of sense, for instance. Once again, I'm going over what I've already said here. The focuses don't make a lot of sense. For instance, if he's going heavy on fires, he won't go for air defense. It doesn't make sense because at the end of the day, you've already got the fires for the air defense anyway. There is no structure, where historical has some structure. Back to my original point. Let's zoom all the way back to the beginning. The reason why I'm making this video is I want to make you guys aware of two things. One, how chaotic Hey Historical is, but also a part of HOI4 that you've probably forgotten about. So if you go into a game like this, 1936, go into the map mode here, and in the bottom right here, not only do you have historical and or ahistorical, you also have game rules. So the first thing is buffing nations. We're not going to talk about that today, but that is an interesting mechanic I like to explore in future. But anyway, moving on. And then we have rule sets for multiplayer, mainly for multiplayer. And then we have AI behavior. So from here, if you do want, let's say, the Germans to go down the civil war path and go democratic, you can actually tell them to do democratic every single time if they wanted to. Be aware, though, this will disable your achievements because you're kind of like trained to load the dice of the game in a way. It's surprising they even like disable achievements for this kind of stuff, you know. I suppose the most anal achievements are the HOI4 ones because like in Victoria 3 and CK3, you don't even need Iron Man turned on, do you? They're kind of very lenient with your achievements. But in HOI4, they're like, you must play historical and they must go all down the historical paths. Because if I select one of the different paths, like the Christian democracy path for Italy, the game's like, no achievements. In a weird kind of way, historical turned on, which is here in the bottom right, is kind of the defaults for everything, other than certain scenarios triggering and then different nations going down alternate history paths. So where I'm going with this is I thought it'd be kind of cool if instead of calling it historical and random mode, which I personally feel like that's what it should be called, you're either picking historical or chaos, anarchy, or you should have some preloaded options. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? So here's like you could say an opposite scenario where basically everyone does the opposite of their ideology. So if they were to go fascist historically, they'll go democratic. And if they go democratic, they go fascist. And if they go communist, they go non-aligned. So it creates this weird structure to the game of an alternative world scenario. But then the game still plays like historical because there's some relative structure to the chaos of the world. Are you catching what I'm trying to say here? I suppose we reached the point now that if you do want to make that mode, I suppose you can preload it and engineer it with these said settings. I suppose the only reason you'd want that alternative historical mode is if you want to win and go for achievements. But this is the big question, guys. Would it be better if there was a preset bunch of game rules that you could play with achievements? Or is it just okay the way it is and we can go for a historical or chaos mode? Do you like historical? Do you like chaos? Tell me how you get your achievements. I suppose that's also an important thing to remember. When you turn historical off, you can still get achievements, even though the world behaves in very chaotic, random ways. Because one of the typical things to do is to weaken Germany early on, let's say as France, by turning historical on and hope they have a civil war, and then you can potentially intervene somehow and, I don't know, cause a lot of problems for Germany, for instance. I suppose you could go with the opposing ideas of the idea of instead of World War II being about Germany-centric, you could have a World War II that's Soviet-centric, couldn't you? And I suppose you could go for almost the West becoming more stagnant as opposed to intervening. I know there's lots of ideas to play with here, but it'd be kind of cool to have the option to do those kind of things as a drop-down menu, as a pre-scenario based gameplay. And I suppose in a way what you could do is Paradox could even sell these, couldn't they? These scenarios. And I suppose if people could get achievements as a part of these scenarios, I think people will be down for them. But once again, it's a bit of a reach for offering them paid, because at the end of the day you can actually create these scenarios manually, but you're technically only paying for the ability to play them with achievements off. Oof, you guys would be so mad about that. I can understand why you wouldn't want that. Anyway, this video is just a bit of food for thought. You know, I just want to reiterate to most of you, we've only got 2 game modes in HOI4 that you can play with achievements, and that's historical and random chaos anarchy mode, full random mode. Anyway, tell me in the comments below, is it historical for you or is it chaos? Apart from that, have a good day. See you soon. Bye. Thanks for watching. If you want more content, click on the video on screen.